Rise up, the Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. The crew is back, and now it's time to rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. Rise up, rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. The crew is back, and now it's time to rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. Rise up.
And we're back to the D's on Fire podcast. We're a little later this week due to some technical difficulties from our Wednesday recording and my sickness delaying my ability to edit and find out the audio recording. And then by that point, we decided, let's wait. Maybe we'll have some Duquesne wins to talk about instead of just the 3 losses. And we got both of them. So great.
As our misfortune turned into fortune. So
yeah.
that was nice.
Yeah. It was going to be a rather sad podcast where it was for a lot of forced optimism on my part, and now we have some real optimism. So, Alec, let's get into the UMass game real quickly, and then let's do your statistical deep dive that you did, which was excellent on Wednesday, and people need to hear about it.
Okay, all right, that's cool. Yeah, so UMass, we lost.
We did. It was a fun paced game, and in the first half it looked like it could be a game that would benefit us with that pace, but UMass is just as deep as us apparently when it comes to their bench, and the same mistakes that plague us in losses came back to bite us in this one as well. But sticking with the positive aspects of that game that seemed to carry over, Day Grant is 100% back. No question in my mind. It happened early in the UMass game where I decided that he was back. He continued it by scoring over 20 points in this game, and then it carried over to the George Washington game where really everybody shot the ball well, Day included. And then the other thing that I noticed that seemed to carry over, Joe Reese really seemed to be bringing more interior force or some sort of showing strength more so inside defensively and offensively, and that continued against George Washington as well. He was able to get to his spots where he was getting open looks, which hasn't been the case for a decent stretch now, and it was great to see that he's bringing some.
So much so, I had a really hot take on Wednesday that I will repeat later. It's less true after the George Washington game, but so I'll reveal that a little bit later. But yeah, Joe Reese had been struggling, I think, going into the UMass game, and the UMass game included. But it's unfortunate because he played 15 minutes in that game. He got in foul trouble. He's been getting in foul trouble a lot in conference play, and but he was 3 for 3 from the field, 7 points, 3 rebounds. You know, if you break that down to like per 36, 100%. That's pretty good for any advanced metric.
Yeah, and the other big that showed up in the UMass game, Austin Rotroff, has continued to carry where he really has the past few games now, has just continued to provide an offensive spark, which wasn't expected. And I'm trying not to blend games, but in the GW game, it really seemed like they were trying to get him going on some pick and rolls. And like he just was refusing to actually put the shots up in the GW game with getting those chances.
I mean, he's pretty good at the pick and roll, and he's been playing both, not just offensively, defensively. He's taken a step. Also taking a step defensively. Trey Williams, and we'll get to that with the stats they show. But defensively, Trey Williams has been, next to Jimmy Clark, he's the second best defensive player in conference play, I would say, next to Jimmy Clark, who had 6 steals in the UMass game. Also scored over 20 points, shot 8 of 14 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3. The problem with the UMass game is our bigs didn't rebound. Day had a double-double, which is cool, but he was our leading rebounder. Don't necessarily want your shooting guard to be the leading rebounder in any game, really.
Yeah, and you mentioned that our guards really are good rebounders. That's mainly because of offensive rebounding, I think, more so than anything else. because of how great we are offensive rebounding, they follow their shots, and that's probably why they're so high up there. But I will say I distinctly remember one of Day Day's rebounds in the UMass game where he just went up. It was probably like the halfway point between the basket and the free throw line, jumped up and grabbed the ball with authority, even though nobody was around him. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that's a true rebounding play there.
To piggyback off that, I looked it up because a glimpse into some stats. Day Day's averaging 5.6 rebounds a game, and this is just conference play stats. 5.6 rebounds. Jimmy Clark 5.2 rebounds. They're both our leading rebounders overall in conference play. Day Day's the third leading rebounder in the A10 from the shooting guard position. So he's a good guard, rebounding guard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I really wanted to touch on from UMass's game.
I mean, let's just say it that got killed on the defensive glass, let up
Yeah, I
16
I
offensive
alluded
rebounds, which
I
is
I alluded to
arguably,
it.
yeah. But let's just
All
come out
right.
and say it. It's I think it's the reason why we lost this game, because in the second half, especially, we were kind of making a small comeback. But the first half is where I think most of the let up offensive rebounds came from, and that dug us a hole. And we were kind of making a small comeback in the second half, but it was like too big of a hole ultimately to come out of. And Louise on UMass, the last like basically 5 minutes of that game turned into a free throw. Let's see if he's going to make his free throws. And
He was
credit to
making
him, he
everything.
did. He shot 17 of 18 from the line. The dude just, and sometimes it was a 4 point game in those last few minutes. So for him they needed every single one of those free throws for us not to come back. So credit to Luis, especially to prevent us from getting a surprise win.
Yeah, and Luis did suffer an injury in the following game, which is I think played a role in why UMass lost to LaSalle or lost to um, Richmond on Wednesday night, which we were shocked by. But they did beat LaSalle today. I'm trying to see. You know what? I'm looking at the women's scores. I'm sorry. Uh, I'll have to go back and figure this out. That's been something that's kind of been curious. Not only have the records been similar, the schedules have also been really similar. Like when the men's team played UMass, the girls' next game was UMass. And then the girls played George Washington on Wednesday. And now the guys' game is George Washington. Like,
Does that doesn't
no,
normally
that's
happen?
not
Oh, okay,
that's
okay.
not normal. And they're also like,
In years past, I mean.
yeah, no, it hasn't been like the same teams. They don't take road trips together or anything, and they haven't because they're still days apart. Um, and the New Year's Eve games, Rhode Island, both teams played Rhode Island at the same time
Right.
at
Yes.
opposing courts.
Yes.
Like
And
that's just been
you had to do the
yeah,
multicast for that on
yeah.
ESPN.
And I was doing that today as well. But it's just like really bizarre that the schedules are matching up this well, where it is kind of confusing to see which one I'm looking on the ESPN app. But UMass lost to George Mason. That's right. That's why it was shocking. And they lost to Davidson today. Let me see if Louise played in today because I know he missed all the second half in that game. No, he didn't play. And their star point guard, Fernandez, also didn't play and is likely going to be out for a while. So UMass has two major injuries to their star guards. And I mean, that's just brutal for them because Luis looked like a true star, and Fernandez was their best player, even with
And
Luis
Luis
on
is
the
a
court.
freshman, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So super impressive.
yeah. So we face the best UMass team that we're going to have to face, most likely. So there is that aspect to it.
Yeah. The only Trey Clark played really well, both offensively and defensively in that game. There were times where it seemed like the offense was running through him. He's the only guy who can really get to the rim at will, like whenever he wants. And when he does that, that opens up people from three. He sometimes does these cute little dump off passes to the big man, whether it's Joe Reese or Rotroff, and he's pretty good at it. So I don't know. UMass seemed like he's just the best player on the. He's the best Duquesne player. Like this is the end of conversation. We're not going to react after every good game that some Duquesne player has. It's Jimmy Clark,
Yeah.
hands down, no questions asked.
Yeah, it is. And that was one thing we said on Wednesday's recording attempt, and it's still true after today. Jimmy Trey Clark is the best
He
Duke.
had gotten foul trouble, unfortunately, for the GW game, but still was effective in his minutes.
And the graphic came out that he is the Pittsburgh Steeler because of his leading in conference in
There we go.
steals.
I
So now
like
we've got the Pittsburgh Steeler and Trey Williams as a Pirate. So we just need to find somebody to be a Penguin, and we'll have all three sports teams
that.
incorporated into this Duquesne basketball team.
Oh God, that makes me a little sick, but okay, it's fine.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think if the other thing that we touched on that I feel like is important is we connected that there is a connection between the off-ball defense and the defensive rebounding, where the lack of rotating that's needed is causing wide open defensive rebounds to nobody to get them and giving up wide open offensive boards for opposing teams. So if we're able to continue to focus, which we did a fantastic job of, especially in the first half today, where the defensive focus off ball was there from the get go.
Yes.
If we do that, we are a much tougher team in against anybody, really.
I agree. I remember one episode that we did a few weeks back where I'm like, this team defensively on the ball isn't that bad. The statistics back it up. It's just the rebounding sometimes, and then, like you said, the rotations, which lead to those let up offensive rebounds. That's where that's our biggest Achilles heel, and that kind of dictates whether we're going to have a good defensive game or not.
Yeah. All right. I want you to jump into the statistical deep dive, unless you have something else from the UMass game that you want to talk about.
No, I mean, I broke down a play where it breaks down like the rotational breakdown that you mentioned, but we won't get into that. It's like this is a week ago at this point, so I'll save that for another time where there's a defensive breakdown at another game. I'm sure it'll happen again. But yeah, so statistical deep dive. So yeah, I was interested. We're over halfway through conference play now, and what sparked me to look into some of the A10 numbers, especially, was before the UMass and GW game, Day really hasn't been playing up to his standard, and it seemed like Jimmy Clark, not only defensively but offensively, has been the best player on the Dukes, and the stats back it up. So I'll lead off with Jimmy Clark. He's been the best player, 14.7 points, and this is including the UMass game. So this is excluding the GW game that happened today when we're recording. Averaging 15 points, shooting an insane 57% from 2-point range, which is the highest among all the Duquesne players. That's including Joe Reese, Trey Williams. It's excluding David Dixon, who's shooting 90%, but that's because he's had like a few perfect games or so in his limited minutes. Yeah. So if you exclude, the 90% David Dixon plays when he does play, Jimmy Clark is shooting the best from 2-point range. And at the guard position, 57%, that's an insane number. I said earlier, Jimmy Clark and Day have been our best rebounders, weirdly. So getting killed on the offensive glass, UMass makes sense because our big men aren't really doing the rebounding like they should. Joe Reese has been getting into foul trouble a lot. He's leading the fouling 3.4 a game. So that makes sense as well. What else do we have here? Some fun Jimmy Clark defensive stats. So you alluded to it earlier. He's obviously leading the A10 in steals. He has in conference play alone, a 5.3 steal percentage. That leads A10. And then per KenPom overall in steal percentage, 4.56%, which is 28th best in the country. So this dude just pickpockets people for a living and is one of the best players in Division I basketball at it. So we have a truly elite defensive player, and he got in foul trouble today at the GW game, but you take those risks when you have someone special like that.
Yeah, Dan Broad's touched on that earlier in the season, and just to really put his ranking into perspective, there's 300 some college basketball teams
Yes.
full of 13, 13 deep scholarship players on each of those teams.
Yeah, I don't feel like doing the math, but that's a lot of players.
That is an absurd ranking
Yeah.
in the country.
Another one I wanted to say was Trey Williams. So earlier, you've argued that he's a decent defensive player. This was early in non-conference play. I wasn't necessarily seeing it on the court, I saw glimpses of it, I should say, on the court. Wasn't seeing it in the numbers. It's showing up in the numbers now. Trey Williams in conference play has been averaging 1.4 blocks a game. That leads the team. He's also has a 8.2 block percentage on the Dukes, which ranks like top 10 in the A10 so far. And I've seen it with my eyes too. Like I admitted in the last podcast we recorded, like he's been getting some blocks in, so, and showing in the numbers finally, which is good.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else statistically that I remember you diving
Okay,
into.
so I just
There's the
saw
big
two
one.
more. I'll start with Day. So Day's play, I said he hasn't been playing as well, and it shows in the numbers. He's only averaging 11.7. I think on the season, he's like 15 or something on the season. So it's below his average overall in the season. Shooting a horrible 26.7% from 2-point range. And it's because he either gets blocked or doesn't get a foul call when he does the few times that he does drive, or he just takes a mid-ranger that just isn't going to go in. Taking a jump shot doesn't go in. Shooting okay from 3-point percentage, not quite what he's used to. He's at 37% right now. He's over a 40% shooter on the season, but his shooting definitely, now it's kind of coming back after the UMass and GW games, but before that, we weren't really seeing the same Day great in non-conference.
And the second half of the Loyola game. I just want to point it out.
Okay.
I called it after that game that Day was back.
That's true. So yeah, the last person I wanted to bring up is Austin Rotroff. Has had crazy, his advanced numbers are insane. So per 100 possessions, Austin Rotroff averages 20 rebounds a game. He has an offensive rating of 117 points per 100 possessions and 96 points defensive rating, which are basically, for offensive rating, anything over 115 is like really stellar. And then you want to be definitely below 100 for defensive rating. So having a defensive rating of closer to 97, but either way, in the minutes that he's playing, Austin Rotroff he's been good defensively and offensively. So I kind of argued when we first recorded on Wednesday that
I'll solely backtrack. At the time, it was a worthwhile conversation. Heck, I was talking about not even caring about winning these games until tournament play.
Exactly.
We should just focus on getting these players better individually and growing, and just focusing on the tournament because it's a one-bid league.
I'm still not totally opposed to this after the GW game. I argued, and I will argue a little bit today, that Austin Rotroff can and should start for this team. He's averaging 12 minutes a game right now. I'm not necessarily saying give him 30 minutes a game. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying our biggest weakness is rebounding. Austin Rotroff is one of the best rebounders in the A10. For a while, he was leading in offensive rebounding percentage across the country in non-conference play. And I don't think just starting him will solve our defensive rebounding issues altogether, but it certainly will help a lot. Joe Reese lately has not been playing up to his standards. And so I think if you split, and I like David Dixon a lot. I wish he could play more, but it just seems like he hasn't been in the rotation. The game time at the 5 position has been split between Joe Reese and Austin Rochoff. So all I'm saying is I think it should be a little more equal. That's kind of what I'm saying, like 20 and 20.
Yeah, and I mean, we've alluded to it now. It seems like poor timing because Joe Reese 6 for 13 from the field, with 4 of those misses being from three, which you know,
They were just having fun out there at that point,
well,
him
yeah.
shooting those many threes. So yeah.
But he also had five assists and 5 boards today. So he's and you alluded to this, I think last podcast or 2 podcasts ago. Joe Reese is a very skilled passer for a big.
Yes.
So that is a valuable asset to have. But I agree with you that if we're seeing that we get beat on the boards quickly in the game, the switch is very clear. Just
Yeah.
put Kucherov in for Reese and focus on the defensive end of things. And then the offense will flow. We have so many offensive players who can get going, and we just added another one in this GW game because I mean we've talked about it in the past. McGriff's been dealing with nagging injuries all season. I think I think that might be like why he suddenly came on strong and why he got in the game often and early in this one, along with Trey being in foul trouble. But usually the first guard off the bench is Rozier. In this game, it was Quincy McGriff.
Yeah. I agree. Like, I think this worked so deep offensively and if Austin Rochoff, he's a great pick and roll. He can finish at the rim. He's a pretty good finisher, so he can still operate in the pick and roll. He's not gonna doesn't have any post moves like Joe Reese does, but if you start him, Trey Williams has been starting. He's got a few post moves, so he can create out of the post if you really need him to do it. And yeah, Quincy McGriff, Day, Trey Clark, Tevin Brewer. I mean, all these guys can create off the dribble. So, you know, I think Rochoff should be playing 20 minutes a game. He won't start. But there's like it sounded crazy, but if you look at the numbers a little closely and you see how he's been playing, it's not as crazy as it sounds off the bat. And I'll just throw these in here. In A10 defensive rebounding percentage, Austin Rochoff leads the team at 23.5% and true rebounding of 20%. So you want if those numbers are over 20%, like you're an absolute elite rebounder in the country. So
Yeah, and all right, I think that was basically it from the statistical deep dive. Let's get into the GW game, which, I mean, we've talked about it before. When there's a huge offensive blowout or a huge blowout in your team's favor, there doesn't seem to be as much to talk about just because everything went so well. Everything went so well today. I alluded to
not a
it.
bad thing. Not a bad
Joe,
thing for us. We'll take it, right?
no, Joe Reese, triple nickel, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 13 points. Day Grant, triple nickel, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 18 points. 5 of 10 shooting from the field for Day with 3 of 5 from three. Tevin Brewer also 3 of 5 from three. Tevin made his threes early on in the game where it wasn't as big of a lead, and they
More
just
important.
yeah, and they just left them open.
Yeah.
They were open looks. I'm really not sure if the scouting report was bad or I don't know. They didn't seem to be aggressive in coming to the guy handling the ball around the three, which seems like just a bad scouting report in my mind. But there might have been something there that I just didn't know.
I think with Brewer specifically, because I didn't bring him up in the stats, but his stats don't really. He hasn't been shooting the ball a lot lately. There's been a lot of 0 point games from Brewer, but I don't bring it up because that's not necessarily his job. I mean, he should shoot when he's open because he's a over. I think he's like 40% 3 point shooter. Um, but his job is to facilitate the offense, and he's the best ball handler that we have. So that's the only thing I can think of that he just wasn't taking that many shots. So maybe they thought we don't have to guard this guy from three, but Yeah, they should have looked a little closer because he's still a good 3-point shooter.
Yeah, and I mean, once he made his threes, and Day made his threes, Trey Williams even made threes in this game. He made one in the first half before it was out of hand, and then he
Yeah,
made one in the second half when it was out of hand.
I just
Um,
wrote that in my notes. I was like, Trey Williams made a 3!
yeah,
Exclamation point.
made two of them.
Yeah,
12 points, 1 assist, 4 rebounds for Trey Williams on top of a solid defending performance by him again. 5 for 6 from the field. Trey Clark, with his very limited minutes because of foul trouble, 4 for 8 from the field, 1 for 2 from three, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. I don't see the steals numbers. Hold on, because I'm sure he still got
I
his.
got
Yeah,
three
he still got
steals. I
three
have.
steals.
Yep. In 16 minutes. This is 16 minutes. He got 3 steals, 9 points, 50% from the field. I mean, God, those per 36 numbers would be insane.
Yeah, and that's who Trey Clark is. And then the guy who competed with him in the offseason for this last starting spot, Quincy McGriff, had his real like debut in conference play. 17 points, 5 for 8 from three. Uh, and they were all good shots. There really wasn't. I think there was one or two heat check shots that he took, but realistically, they were all open shots within the offense. Um, 6 for 9 from the field in total, so he was 1 for 2 from inside of the 3 point line. Yeah, he just lit it up. I will say our usual stuff. The GW announcing crew. The one guy knew everything he was talking about, very knowledgeable. The other guy definitely sounded like the old player who didn't really look at any scouting report, was just talking based off of how he knew about basketball in the old days.
And his voice. Oh
Oh,
my
his
God, it was
voice.
so
It was a
raspy. It was like
it,
he's definitely been smoking like 2 packs a day for 25 years or so.
yeah. And
Um, yeah,
another
my sister is here and we watched the game together and she's like, "Oh my God, this guy is like awful to listen to."
Hey man, I mean maybe he's a hometown legend like Myron Cope was for the Steelers. Like there's something about those voices where like if you're connected to the team, you love it. But when you're a national like you're the
Yeah,
only broadcast for anybody watching, it's a little rough.
that's probably a little true. And I'll give him credit because this was what it was 50-20 at half, right?
Yeah.
So 30-point lead, and he was breaking down like a way for them to get back into the game,
Yeah.
which I admire a lot because most of those people listening to the broadcast are GW fans, and he's like, okay, so in the first 4 minutes, GW needs to really take it to Duquesne and blah blah blah. So I give him credit for that. He was optimistic.
Yeah, I will say it didn't last long because in the start of the second half, he focused mainly on how great this GW team will be next year. I was like, man, you still have a lot of the season left. You're still in the middle of the
He
same
jumped
fence.
ship pretty quickly. Yeah.
um, but yeah, that and I do want to give a shout out to Ryan Puelo, who's like the most well-known Twitter GW fan who leads the student section, because that student section was loud with a
It
30
was.
point deficit the entire second half. It was crazy. We were
You're
shooting
100%
free
right.
throws with 4 minutes to go, and they were loud. It
Yeah.
was insane.
The game was over and all the players got off the bench and are looking to the crowd and they're doing the Premier League clap to the crowd, but they're like just the crowd was just as rowdy, like giving it back to them with love even in a blowout. So yeah, that's anytime we see these crowds, we're jealous like every time.
100%. So just another note of come on, students. We can do this. Our team's good enough where like it should be a fun environment. It really
Yeah.
should.
Yes.
Um, yeah. The other guy that got in that has never gotten in conference play this year at least, Jalen Cole Williams. He was a guard. He went up for a layup with about 30 less than 30 seconds left. Didn't make it, but was trying to get on the scoreboard. Very very famous on TikTok. It's where he carries a lot of his fame. So Jalen Cole Williams making his conference play debut. Um, Trying to think of anything else. Dixon got in, got a tough foul call on him. He still looks good. I still think like he's going to be very bright for us next year. Um,
He will be an important player. Mark my words, he will be an important player.
Yeah, and this is going based off of my partially forced optimism. Our team next year, if everybody stays together, Trey Clark, Day Grant, Trey Williams, David Dixon, Halil Bare, Matus Ronsky, Quincy McGriff, Kareem Rozier.
I
Like
like all of these
that's a
players.
that's a great core, a great core, and that's not even including like any freshmen or transfers coming in.
Yeah. No,
That's a solid
it
team.
it is bright. It's a bright look ahead for next year for sure. Now you got to cross your fingers every time you talk about next year's team because of the transfer portal now. Um, but on paper and from what we know right now, it looks bright.
Yeah. Um, so
Also, I'll piggyback on um, Quincy McGriff. He played well defensively too.
yeah,
And I'll be honest, and that third foul on Trey Clark in the first half was such a BS call. Um,
I
I
love
knew
this
that.
role reversal. I
Yeah,
I was not going to complain at all about the rest because of how the game went.
no, that was the only thing I'll complain about because at the time I was nervous. We were leading, but it wasn't a blowout yet. Um, and I was worried about James Bishop, who's arguably the best player in the A10, um, averaging like over 20 points a game in the A10. So he's their best player. And, I was nervous that Trey Clark was going to have to guard him all game when he went out and Quincy McGriff came in. He never got cooking at all. I'm looking at the box score now. James Bishop shot 3 of 12 from the field, only 10 points. The dude averages over 20. So, you know, credit to McGriff for holding his own against an elite A10 player.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised by all of these inefficiency numbers because I thought Adams played well, but I guess it was just the second half that he had a short stint of playing well at. Um,
Yeah,
Edwards,
Edwards had, I think he was the leading scorer in the first half with 12 points, and
yeah,
basically no one else was helping him in the first half.
yeah, he had 12 points, I think, with at least 5 minutes to go in the first half too. Like he was their offense, and it was a relatively close game at that point. And then, I mean, there was
Yeah,
nobody
and
there for like an eight minute stretch.
yep,
Um,
that's what I was going to say. The announcer said 8 minutes they went without a bucket. That's a long time in a basketball game.
yep,
Even
and it
like 3 minutes is a long time.
yeah, and we offensively we didn't we didn't take our foot off the gas, as they say, and yeah, we took advantage, and then I made the joke on Twitter. If it was only a 20-point lead, I'd be nervous. But since we got to 30 with
That's
that
right.
day three,
Yep.
we're good. We're good. I was confident.
The only thing I was nervous about was the overhitting. Um, it was I bet on this game. I bet the over straight, and then I did do a same game parlay with the Dukes winning with the over. So I had the over needed to hit in this
Yeah,
game,
you were
and
invested in the over.
yeah, and there was I needed it was 153 and a half. Needed 4 points in the last 3 minutes, and there wasn't any points scored. I think for half of that, so a
Yeah.
minute and a half, I was like, "Oh, this is making me sweat." Actually, so I'm sweating a little bit, but it hit. Um, yeah, we made 17 threes in this game. Shot 50% from the field, 53% from three, with 17 made threes. We averaged like 8, which is an elite number. So 17 is just out of this world, crazy.
And like I said, I think like defensively they didn't play us correctly. But with the shots that we took, if we get those looks, that I'm pretty confident that should be our average of making like 50% with the guys that took the shots and as open as they were.
I would say 40
Quincy
to 45% on a like to come down a little bit because
Quincy
50 is crazy.
Quincy
But yeah,
McGriff Quincy McGriff might have to lower his
yeah,
standards. But I mean, at the same page, Joe Reese usually makes at least one of his four. Trey Williams, okay, maybe he's not taking threes in general, so there is that. But
I
like,
wrote that specifically when he made one. That's how shocked I was. So we can count him out.
all right, but yeah, I still feel good that it wasn't an out of this world performance by our team. Like I feel like that could be our relatively normal expectations for offense. Not 90 points, but low 80s should be kind of where this team is. Um, and if they give us wide open looks, then yeah, why not bump up into the 90s?
And I remember looking this up in conference play we overall in the season, I think we're averaging 76 or 75 points a game. In A10 before this GW team only averaging 70 points. So
Yeah,
our point average has been down a little bit, but I think what's more impressive in this game was the defense, which we talked about in the first half, 50-20. Um, only what 68 points total or 64? I forget.
I think it's 67.
67. Sorry. But yeah, our defense was on point. This was definitely the best defensive performance against a good offensive team. I had preview notes that I went through on our original recording on Wednesday, but I said that this was going to be a shootout, two great offenses going against each other. So I'm impressed that our defense held up as well as it did.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that you mentioned was they're the best 2 point uh,
Yes,
field from field goal percentage perspective.
per
And
Ken Palm, that's their eighth in the country in two
yeah,
point
and
field goal percentage.
and interior defense was the area we were most concerned about
Mm-hmm.
generally with our team, and we definitely passed this test with flying colors.
Yeah, and the other thing I saw was they're not very GW is not very deep, so I was a little worried about, or not. I wasn't worried about it, but that was just something to note. I think they had two guys in top 10 in minutes played per game. Um, and I was worried about James Bishop because he's, like I said, arguably the best A10 player in the conference, and he only scored 10 points today. So just can't say enough good things about this game, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that sums it up. Everything went well. It was a great matchup. It turned out to be a great matchup for us. Um, we'll see how it continues into the rest of conference play. And one of the biggest things from that game, we survived a week off and actually got better, which is
Away,
yeah,
away from home.
all of the things that we were worried about
Yeah.
solved with one game. Crazy.
Yeah, this game shouldn't, like, reading into the preview and everything. I think GW was favored by a point. This was
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
spread wise, it was a pick 'em. So, which I know with college basketball you can find some good lines, but still we need something to go off of statistically. So the fact that we won by so huge, we should ride the highs when we have them.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, and so now that we've gotten the men's side of things out of the way, women celebrated their 50th anniversary this past week. Um, it was great. They had a reception on Saturday night, the game against UMass on Sunday, where they celebrated all the players that came back. They had players all the way back from the first team throughout. It was an impressive showing from the former players. They treated them well. Um, it was great to be there. I got to hear all about how the program's grown, how it started in like a tiny gym that was like a YMCA half court LA Fitness thing for practices in some school building somewhere, and they grew and played games at uh, the, the the Igloo, as they called it,
Right.
Civic
Yep.
Arena.
Yep.
Um, and one of the players talked about how they used that as an advantage because it was colder there than any other facility that the players were used to, so they had the home field advantage there.
Yeah.
But now they can't even believe the facilities that the girls have. Took a tour of that. The game itself wasn't the best. UMass was as hot as Duquesne was in the GW game to start off. I think they went 8 for 8 to start their game with five or six of those being from three. Um, so it was just UMass's game from the start. I talked to Coach Burt after this game, just because I, I was a practice player with him and got invited to watch the game.
Personally
Um,
invited.
yep, well, along with season ticket holders and all. But yeah, it was great to see him, and uh, my stepdaughter got to go to the game. She found a new favorite player because uh, she was waiting in line to get a water or a lemonade after the game, and Tess Myers was getting the drink, turned around, and saw Maya like right behind her. I was like, "Oh, hi," and Maya didn't say anything because she's too shy. But because
Starstruck.
Because Tess said hi to her, new favorite player and leading
That's all
scorer
it
on the
takes when
team.
you're that age. Yeah.
Yeah, best 3-point shooter. So yeah, Tess Myers has a new number one fan. Um, yeah, in general, great environment. Very happy with the program going forward. Similar to the guys, they had a big bounce back win today against VCU at home after their disappointing loss against UMass, and then against George Washington at George Washington on Wednesday.
Weirdly
Um,
staying on pace with the guys, the record wise, it's
yeah,
I said this in the other recording, it's creepy. It's kind of creepy now how in sync they are.
it was a fun running gag for a little while. Now it's what the guys are 15-8 and the girls are 15-9 because the girls have played one more game. Hopefully,
Yeah.
the guys finally break the streak and we get some separation because we don't want them to lose again. But yeah, it's been creepy that they're still the same, playing the same teams basically. Um,
Looking in the
GW,
mirror.
yeah, GW and UMass are two of the top teams in the A10 on the women's side. They both could be NCAA tournament teams. I talked about this in the attempted recording on Wednesday. Um, I think UMass is almost certainly an NCAA tournament team. They were one last year. They returned
Hmm.
basically all their players and have played really well this year. Um, on the guys' side of things, like the men's basketball team was the only team out of the three major winter sports of hockey, women's basketball, and men's basketball that was the question mark as to whether they could get into the NCAA tournament too, and then have all three sports showing up, and that would be crazy. But UMass is building something, so that's nice to see for the A10 conference. But the Dukes going to the positive aspect tonight or today against VCU, winning 66-63. They grew the lead to I think 11 or 13 at one point in the second half, and then VCU kept making it a nail biter. Like the late fourth quarter timeouts and everybody coming up and the free throws and the threes that VCU was making made it a lot closer than it needed to be. But hey, Duquesne figured out a way to win. That's the important thing. Niall Bernard, the little giant, as she's referred to, was huge. 5 of 10 from three, 6 of 14 from the field, including some late threes to really carry the day. Amaya Hamilton had 9 rebounds. Niall Bernard had 7 in the first half. She's by far the smallest player on the court, like 5'1" maybe.
Oh God.
Yeah, so great work by her. Megan McConnell had a phenomenal game as always. 16 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. They didn't give her credit for any steals, but I distinctly remember one that she turned into a layup. So there's some sort of stat miscalculation there. And then they starting Iona Townsend, who in non-conference play definitely seemed like the best center on our team. She got hurt and has been playing hurt, so they've limited her minutes. I think she's finally getting back to health, and I think it's impacting the offense in a good direction. Um, Overall, if all the main girls have their best day, they can beat anybody. It's the issue has just been everybody hasn't been consistently shooting on the same day. The men's side of things, it seems like it's all or nothing. Everybody's making shots or nobody's making shots. Girls, it's a mishmash and it's just seeing who has the hot hand. Um, but Meg McConnell and Amaya Hamilton are the two players that are consistently making plays on both sides of the floor, regardless of how well they're doing at putting the ball in the basket. And it's very important to have those sort of players because
100%. Yep.
you can consistently rely on them to positively impact the game.
Yeah. That's why I value defense so much, and why Trey Clark and David Dixon, guys like that on the men's side, stick out to me, because they're making, if you make effort on the defensive side of the floor, it can turn into easy offense.
Yeah, and I agree with that with Trey Williams, obviously, even though
Trey
it doesn't
Williams
always
has
show up
gotten
in
in
the
that
stat.
conversation now too. Yes,
Well,
you're right. You're
even
right.
if it doesn't show up in the stat book,
No,
it,
it has. It has. You're
it
right. I
has
shouldn't have
now.
left him off. I shouldn't have left him off. And I found out this week that I didn't realize that the women's A10 tournament is in Wilmington, Delaware, which is where my office is. I live about 30 minutes away from Wilmington, Delaware. So definitely once the schedule comes out and the seating, I definitely want to make it out there, see this team in person.
Yeah. Yeah, go get Meg McConnell's autograph and then
Yeah,
ask her
yeah.
for TJ McConnell's autograph on a 76ers shirt or jersey or something.
I probably won't, but
No. All right. The thought, just in
searching
case.
for autographs like when you're a grown man is kind of weird. So
Yeah, especially college aged kids
like
that
I think you could do it since you have kids to
actually,
piggyback off
yeah,
and be
it's for
like,
them.
oh, it's
Sure.
for them, and then yeah. So I don't necessarily have that advantage.
Yeah, it's for my nephew,
Nephew,
Nick
yeah,
Frost.
exactly.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So what looked like a bad week turned into a pretty good one based off of today's games. I understand we're reactionary, but it's from the conference standings as a whole. We jumped from probably ninth ninth to 10th to 6th today.
Yes, yep.
Now we're thinking we can go back to a double bye if we win the games that we're supposed to close this season out.
It's really bunched up in the middle. We're 5-5, right behind the Bonnies, who we play again. So that'll be a very important matchup. I think it's after the George Mason game, I believe. St. Joe's is 5-5. GW now 5-5. George Mason 5-6, who we play next. I mean, it's really tight there in the middle, so it can go either way. So
Yeah,
this is a big run.
and I will say the only tough part is every team that's above us right now, with the exception of first place VCU, who it doesn't matter, we're not going to catch them um, for any need of a tiebreaker. We've lost to Dayton, St. Louis, Fordham, and St. Bonaventure. And preseason expectations and in conference expectations, it's pretty clear that the top three have pretty consistently been Dayton, St. Louis, and VCU. And then the questions being, who's the fourth team going to be? So it's truly going to be an exciting race, and Duquesne's actually in this race, which before the season started, we've harped on before. Who would have thought?
So of those teams that we just mentioned, George Mason is next, February 8th. Then we play the Bonnies. Then we play St. Joe's all at home. I think we need to go 3-0 in there to have a serious shot. So these next three games are all at home. Bonnies and St. Joe's we've already played before, and this will be a big 3-game stretch. It'll probably determine the season.
Yeah, and St. Bonaventure away and St. Bonaventure at home is usually a completely different beast. Yeah. Our game against St. Louis after that stretch, I mean, even if we lose that game, if we win those first three, we're still in a good spot.
Exactly.
Hopefully by the time we talk to you next week, we'll have some more Duquesne wins to talk about.
Go Dukes.
The Dukes are back and now it's time to rise up. Rise up.